If you've ever been to a dentist and thought the pain was unbearable, you've never heard of Dr. Silas Birch, and if you had, you wouldn't be alive to tell the tale. Because in 1902, in the quiet snowy town of Ashmore, Illinois, something happened that the newspapers erased, the town buried, and the church never forgave. And yet, records of a dentist who never used anesthesia, who never charged money, and whose patients all left his office smiling, even though most were dead within a week. This is the story of the man they called the Soul Puller. Dr. Birch arrived in Ashmore during the fall of 1901. No one knew where he came from. No letters of recommendation. No medical license. No relatives, just a tall, bony man in a black overcoat who purchased the old Winthrop house and converted the parlor into a dental office. His equipment was old, rusted, and stained with something far too dark to be tobacco. But the town was desperate. The previous dentist had vanished 3 months earlier. Vanished, not moved. And folks were suffering. So they ignored the smell. They ignored the whispers. They even ignored the screams. Because Silas fixed their pain. At first, his patients were normal folks, farmhands, children, old men. And every one of them walked out with perfect teeth. No swelling, no soreness, no aftercare needed. But after the 3rd week, they started acting, strange. Mrs. Elaine Durst, age 73, baked 42 pies in one night and delivered them to graves at the cemetery. When asked, she simply replied, "He told me they were hungry." Henry Rowe, a boy of 9, began sleeping beneath his bed and whispering to the floorboards. "She lives there now," he'd said. "She hums me to sleep." The sheriff dismissed it all. Stress, he claimed. Folks get nervous before winter. But the winter brought no snow, just fog. Thick, choking fog that rolled in every morning and left a taste of iron on the tongue. That's when the disappearances began. At first, just livestock. Then children. Then adults. Their homes left untouched. Fireplaces still lit. Food still warm. Only one thing, missing teeth. Their pillows covered in blood. No footprints. No struggle. No explanation. People began suspecting Silas, but no one dared accuse him openly. Every time someone tried, their mouth would bleed that night. Their teeth would ache like fire, even if they'd never seen a cavity in their life. And eventually, they'd fall silent forever. Pastor Whitman tried. He stood at the pulpit on Sunday and called Silas a serpent among men. The next day, the church bells rang on their own, non-stop, for 6 hours. The townspeople found Whitman kneeling in front of the altar, eyes wide, mouth open. Not a single tooth left in his skull. On the wall behind him was written in blood, "Sermon received." That's when Clara, a 16-year-old orphan girl, decided to do what no adult could. She volunteered for a cleaning. She walked into Dr. Birch's office just before sundown, holding a Bible in her pocket and a knife sewn into her dress. He welcomed her with that same cold smile, his long fingers gently guiding her to the chair. "You have strong teeth," he said. "Strong souls hide in strong teeth." She nodded, heart pounding. He never touched a tool, just stood behind her and hummed a tune she didn't recognize, low, droning, like a funeral dirge underwater. And then, she heard them, voices, hundreds of them, screaming from behind the walls. Names of children lost, cries for help, songs sung backward. Her hands shook, her knife slipped. She turned, fastened for the first time, saw his reflection in the mirror. He had no face, only a dark blur, like rotting fog. His eyes were holes. His mouth stretched far too wide, filled not with teeth, but with tiny hands, reaching, grabbing, twitching. She screamed. The glass shattered. The moment the mirror shattered, time twisted. Clara fell to the floor, the sound of that ungodly humming still vibrating through her bones. She crawled backward, blood running from her ears, not from injury, but pressure. Something behind that mirror had screamed through her soul. Dr. Silas didn't flinch. He simply turned, crouched beside her like an insect on human legs, and whispered, "You've seen too much for your age." His breath smelled of wet dirt and burnt sugar, but Clara didn't cry. She reached for her hidden knife and plunged it into his chest. There was no blood, just a sharp hiss, and then silence. Silas looked down, annoyed, and said, "That was my father's tooth." Then he pulled the blade out and handed it back. To her, she ran. She ran through the fog, tripping over roots that weren't there before, hearing her name whispered from trees, windows, even the stones underfoot. When she reached the church, the door was already open. Father Whitman's body was gone. In its place sat a scroll on the altar. Old parchment, tied in human hair, with her name written in teeth. She opened it. It wasn't a scroll. It was a list. Names, hundreds of them, all past patients. Dates, ages, notes like resisted, embraced, and silenced. At the bottom, in crimson ink, Clara Nettle, scheduled for collection, November 3rd. That was today. She screamed, and every candle in the church blew out at once. Back at Dr. Birch's house, the fog thickened. The townspeople gathered outside, summoned by an urge they couldn't explain. Some came barefoot, others still in bedclothes, all silent, all moving as one, eyes glazed over like sleep. And at the center of them stood Silas, no longer hiding his form. His coat was gone, his skin was gray, his arms stretched unnaturally far, his hands twitched like puppets. From his mouth came a new sound, metal scraping bone, and behind him, the walls of his office breathed. Literally, they inhaled and exhaled, and with every breath, teeth pushed out from the wallpaper like barnacles on a ship. Thousands of them, chattering, clicking, bleeding. Clara climbed to the bell tower. She knew the town had to be awakened. The bell rope was gone, so she tied her hair around the clapper, wrapped it around her waist, and leaped. Her fall rang the bell, and with it came screams. The townspeople collapsed, one by one, as if strings had been cut. The fog screamed too, a sharp, high-pitched whine that shattered glass for a mile in every direction, and Dr. Birchie staggered back, covering his ears. His eyes began to melt, not drip melt, thick black syrup running down his cheeks. He growled, "No, no, not the call of iron, not the bell." And then, behind him, the door to the back room opened on its own. Inside were the souls, not ghosts, not visions, real, flickering shapes of everyone he had ever taken. Some were still screaming, others just hovered, mouths open in permanent terror. They rushed him like a swarm, no sound, no light, just sudden, crushing darkness. Dr. Birch began to fold in on himself, bone snapping like twigs, skin peeling like paper, and the last thing anyone saw was his mouth open wide as if to scream, and 1,000 tiny fingers pulling him inward. The house caved in. By morning, the fog was gone. The bell was broken. Clara was unconscious in the grass, hair missing, but alive. The scroll had burned itself to ash in her pocket, and no one ever spoke of the event again. Not because they didn't remember, but because their mouths wouldn't move. For the rest of their lives, not a single person in Ashmore, Illinois, ever uttered a word about Dr. Silas Birch. They couldn't. Their tongues had turned to stone. You'd think the horror ended when Silas Birch was dragged into the mouths of his stolen souls. But evil doesn't die. It waits. It changes form, and sometimes it hides in the cleanest places. In the months following the collapse of Dr. Birch's house, Ashmore became quiet again. Too quiet. The fog never returned, and the sun rose clean and golden. But those who survived began experiencing strange symptoms. Phantom toothaches, metallic dreams, the taste of ash on bread. Clara, now 17, never spoke of what she saw, but every night she left a single tooth on her windowsill, and every morning it was gone. 1 year later, A traveling dentist named Dr. Lowell stopped in town, claiming to be studying rural dental health. He was charming, polite, and fully certified, and like Silas, he didn't take new patients, only offered checkups to the remaining townsfolk. But Clara saw it in his eyes. The same hollow depth, the same twitch in the left hand. She followed him one night and watched him open the ruins of the Winthrop house with a key made of ivory. Inside, nothing had changed. The walls still pulsed. Teeth still clattered behind the old parlor walls. And on the desk was Silas's appointment book, open, updated, with fresh names, including hers. She ran to the library, a place most had abandoned. There, buried under church records and burnt letters, she found a document titled The Molars of Moloch, a cult, old as dentistry itself, believers that the human soul resided not in the heart, but in the enamel of every tooth, a vessel of memory, of pain, of faith. Their priests didn't preach, they extracted, and Silas, he was their high cleric. Clara realized the truth. Birch never died, he just moved. That night, Clara broke into Lowell's traveling wagon. Inside, shelves lined with human molars catalogued, polished, humming faintly. In the back, a chair, old, familiar, covered in straps. A child-sized skeleton lay on it, smiling wide. In the corner, a small metal cage with something writhing inside a tongue. Still alive, still twitching, whispering her name. Dr. Lowell caught her. "I see he chose you," he said, calmly. Silas always said the pure ones scream the loudest. He lunged. But Clara had prepared. From the church, she'd stolen the last relic, never touched by Foga brass censer filled with iron nails. She threw it at him. The nails embedded in his chest, and with a flash of white, he ignited not in flame, but in memory. Screams, lives, prayers all shot from his mouth like smoke. He collapsed, dissolving into gray powder. But the soul cage cracked, and out came Silas. Not a man, not even a shadow. A swirling knot of teeth, veins, and whispering tongues. He rose to the ceiling, then dropped to the floor, crawling with unnatural speed, toward Clara. "You took my collection," he hissed. "You rang the bell. Now you must listen to the song." She covered her ears, but the sound wasn't physical, it vibrated in her bones. Teeth began to loosen. One dropped, then another. But she screamed through blood, "I am not yours." And she wasn't, because Clara had no soul left to take. In the year since the first event, she'd prayed nightly not to God, but to the memory of those taken. She'd carved names into her skin. She'd offered pain in return for protection. And they heard her. From behind Silas, the souls rose again. But this time, they weren't screaming. They were silent, calm, focused. They held each other, and one by one, they walked into him. Not dragged, they entered him, forcing themselves into his twisted form like light into a crack. He shrieked, body warping, boiling, fighting their entry. But it was too much. With a final gurgling cry, Silas exploded, not with fire or gore, but with silence. True, complete silence. No sound, no wind, no whispers, just peace. Clara awoke 3 days later in the church, surrounded by blank-faced villagers. None spoke, but all nodded. The fog never returned. The dreams faded, and teeth, well, they still fell out from time to time, but they didn't scream anymore. Clara left Ashmore that spring, carrying only one thing, a small bag of iron nails and the appointment book of Silas Birch. She travels now, not as a hunter, not as a victim, but as a witness, visiting small towns, old churches, abandoned clinics, listening, watching, leaving warnings scratched into mirrors. If he offers free dental work, run, because even now, over a century later, Silas isn't truly gone. He's just waiting for someone to open their mouth.